So is working on your own car something that you've been wanting to do, but you're just a little bit scared to be able to dive into that engine bay and start figuring things out, or just the car in general? It doesn't even have to be the engine bay. Well, today I'm here to try and help you. I can have no guarantees that I will help you, but I will damn sure try to. So what is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about car modifications for beginners. This was a requested video that I've gotten a couple times, so I figured we'd go ahead and make this one so that way it may help some of you guys embark on your car modification journey. Now, the main reason I want to make this video is to try to help you guys avoid some of the mistakes that I've made in the past when it comes to modifying cars. This can be said from my Nissans, my Subarus, it doesn't matter. Like, as you go through learning how to do more on cars, the range and possibilities for your skills is also going to grow as you do more difficult installations. I just don't do what I've done and have it be like 10 p.m. on a Sunday night and your car is totally torn apart and you got to go to work on Monday morning. You got to figure something out. We're going to try to avoid that today. So let's start this list off with something rather simple. And that's going to be intakes, baby. Intakes are one of the easiest things you could probably install in your car. Normally it's just a filter, a pipe, and a coupler, and maybe a couple hose clamps at that. Now, if you're going to the extent of installing an airbox, it may have a couple more additional steps in there, but for the most part, I'd honestly rank installing an intake on a car maybe 1 out of 10. A, you'll get some nice induction noises out of the car. B, you're going to be satisfied, you're going to be pumped, you're going to be like, damn, dude, I just put this thing in. Especially if it's your very first install. Like, when you go to install parts for the very first time, you get excited, you get pumped, you're like, damn, I did that. Plus, by doing these things yourselves, you kind of save some money, so that way you don't got to pay a shop to do it. So an intake, super easy to do. Coupler, hose clamp, couple things here, there, bada bing, bada boom, you got yourself an intake on your car. Now, the second thing, which is actually going to make a pretty good difference in how your car feels, is braking components. For the most part, brakes are relatively simple to do on pretty much any car out there. If you're going to the extent of doing rotors, you're probably going to have to remove, well, you are going to have to remove the caliper to get it out of the way. On top of that, if you're already in there, you might as well throw some brake pads in. Brake pads are going to be one of the easiest modifications, maintenance, call it whatever one you feel like, are going to be relatively easy. Now, don't be afraid to make mistakes. It totally happens. I've made mistakes before. Especially, I've made mistakes with brake pads. I remember the first time I went to install brake pads, I installed one of them backwards. So instead of the pad material being on the rotor, it was the metal shim from the other side. Yeah, that was not a good time. Ended up having to go back and buy some new brakes to reinstall in the car and fix all the issues that I made. But there's plenty of install videos out there. There's plenty of resources and documents to help support whatever it is you're trying to do if you get stuck or confused on something. But brakes are going to be one of the easiest things you're going to be able to do on a car. Couple bolts, old pads out, new pads in. Not bad. So next up on the list, we have coilovers. Coilovers are going to be one of the easiest things you can go to install on a car. Typically, it's going to be anywhere between 3 and 6 bolts that hold your stock suspension in. After you get those out, you can really just like ploop the old ones out, ploop the new ones in, rebolt everything up. It's not a scary or detrimental install if you go into it for your very first time. It's pretty straightforward. I remember, when was it? I remember the first time I installed a coilover. That one actually went smooth. I didn't have any issues with that one. Now, on top of coilovers, chassis bracing is another very easy one for a lot of people to go into as a beginner to install. Typically, you're just going to end up bolting on these parts to pre-existing holes in the car, so you don't have to go through, you don't have to drill holes, you don't have to thread up holes or anything like that. Bolts right up. Pretty simple. Sometimes you'll remove the old part, put the new part on. Now, I know sometimes mistakes can happen, and remember, as you're going through doing a lot of this stuff for your first time, you're going to make mistakes. It's 100% unavoidable. It's going to happen. I have cross-threaded holes that should never have been cross-threaded, and then you got to pay the consequences of going through, trying to retap, re-drill, a whole bunch of fun stuff there. But take your time in going through doing a lot of these installs. Last thing you want to do is send a bolt in with an impact, have it cross-thread, and then you can either just never take that bolt out again, and if you do take it out again, you either have to re-drill, retap it, or install a helicoil, which I wouldn't really classify as beginner level. Still not hard to do, but. Following up, fuel pumps actually are not that bad, and I feel like any beginner out there could do a fuel pump on any modern day car. Typically, you're just going to remove the back seat. The fuel pump hanger assembly is going to be underneath the seat that goes into the gas tank. For installing fuel pumps, it's typically going to take, I don't know, if it's your first time, maybe 2 hours or so. You're going to pull out the old fuel pump basket, disassemble that, put the new fuel pump in, get the basket back together, drop it back in, and bam, you got yourself a fuel pump. A lot of these things seem a little scary, or they seem very scary when you first go into doing them, and I've been there. We've all been there. Well, I feel like we've all been there, at least, going into doing this stuff on our own for the very first time, because in the back of your mind, you know, you're like, what if I mess something up? What if something breaks? What if it doesn't work? Have confidence. That's the biggest thing I'm going to tell you guys when going into doing a lot of these DIY installs yourself, is have confidence when going into it. If you go into doing an install and you're kind of standoffish, you're kind of scared a little bit, you don't really want to like mess anything up, it's going to bring down that level of just drive you have to be able to get in there and knock it out. If the parts you're installing do come with specific instructions, follow those instructions step by step. There's also probably 100 detailed install videos out there on YouTube, write-ups on Google of how to install the parts you guys may be going to install, unless it's a brand new platform. Then that one can be a little bit different, but that one's not really too worrisome right now. Easy parts to install because that's what we want. Short shifters are one of my favorite installs to do on a car, and they're typically going to be pretty straightforward and pretty simple. Typically with short shifters, you pop the old one out, you pop the new one in. You're gonna have to disassemble a little bit of your interior trim. Sometimes you may have to go underneath of the car, pop out like a roll pin, maybe unbolt something, move a reverse lockout cable out of the way. But for the most part, short shifters are a very friendly DIY mod for beginners when going into things. You're also going to enjoy that mod quite a bit. Short shifters are one of my favorite things to do on all of my cars. Intercoolers are another pretty straightforward and simple one. Whether it's a front mount intercooler, top mount intercooler, depending on whatever car you're working on, the intercooler should just bolt right up. Follow the instructions on where all the piping goes, put your couplers in, put your hose clamps on, bada bing, bada boom, you got yourself a new intercooler. These installs really shouldn't be too difficult for you guys as you go into them. And if you are feeling overwhelmed or you are feeling a little standoffish, it doesn't hurt to ask a friend to come help you. Ask your neighbor Jimmy, ask your dad, ask your mom, ask your brother, ask your sister, ask your cousin, ask your pet. But having someone there to help you do these installs will also help boost up your confidence a little when you start going into this stuff, because A, having two sets of eyes rather than one looking at what you're doing always makes things a little bit easier and makes things go a little bit smoother. One of the favorite entry-level modifications I think everybody likes is doing an exhaust on their car, whether that's a downpipe, a catback, anything of the nature. Having a exhaust, A, it wakes up the car, B, it makes it sound way better, and C, they're really not that hard to install. The hardest thing that you're going to come across when installing an exhaust on your car is probably going to be fighting with the exhaust hangers that actually hold the exhaust up and keep it from dragging on the ground. Typically, you may run into some rusty bolts if it is an older car. If they snap, if they round off or anything like that, you just may have to get something out to break them free, cut them loose, or anything of that nature. Whenever I run into a bolt that is rusted, rounded, or anything like that, it's not a bad idea to get a socket that is one size smaller, pounded on there. That should seal up against the nut pretty well, and then you can typically break them free that way. But as a beginner enthusiast, catbacks and downpipes are going to make your car sound way better, and you're going to love the end. Well, I have a feeling you're going to love the end result. Now, if you're past the point of wanting to do beginner modifications or entry-level modifications, as I like to call them, and you want to go into something a little bit more difficult, but you don't know where to start and you don't know what to do, some other things you can knock out after you've gotten past that comfort zone of like, all right, I feel like I can do this stuff, is fuel system stuff. Injectors are going, I'd probably rate injectors on the next level of car modifications, mainly because you have to get some more stuff out of the way. You're dealing with something you haven't dealt with before. That can be said about like fuel rails and injectors, since they're both in the exact same spot, but overall they're still not terrible to do. The biggest issue I see when it comes to installing fuel injectors, and I've been guilty of this before, is whenever you go to install your new injectors, you may end up tearing an O-ring. Now, if you see a small fuel leak off of your fuel rail or your intake manifold, having a small fuel leak is not the end of the world. Your car's not going to blow up. It's not going to catch on fire instantaneously right there. All you got to do is just pull them back out, replace the O-rings, put them back in, make sure everything seats. Lubrication is probably going to be your best friend on that one, getting those injector O-rings to seal without ripping, because ripping is something that will happen quite often. Next up, for like moderate level install type stuff, I'd say is a turbo replacement. They're really not that bad to do. A lot of the times when you go on forums and you ask people, you say, hey, how difficult is it to install X, Y, or Z parts? For the most part, some people are going to overhype and say this is incredibly difficult. It only takes one bad experience from someone installing a specific part or a type of part to kind of leave a bad taste in their mouth. And then when people ask them for their opinion, it's not always a positive one, and it may detract you from wanting to go in there and start modifying your car a little bit more. So, turbo replacement. Hardest thing you're going to come across there is probably going to be exhaust studs and or bolts that like to rust and seize on there, especially from all the heat that the turbos see. But turbo replacements, probably put it at moderate level. Not too bad to do. And the list can continue to go on and on and on and on with some of these modifications. But one thing that I want you guys to remember when you start going into doing a lot of this DIY stuff is everything you're dealing with is a mechanical part. It is a replaceable part. If you damage something, if you break something, it is not going to just immediately total out your car. It's not the end of the world. There's no need to have a massive freak out. They make replacement parts for pretty much anything you're going to be working on. if you do damage something or you do break something, you can get a replacement part. The experience that you're gonna get from doing a lot of these DIY installs, A, it's gonna boost your self-confidence when it comes to working on cars. B, it's gonna save you a lot of money. But C, you can't have the mentality of you're scared to work on something, because then it's just gonna put you off. It's gonna stand you off a little bit more and you're not gonna wanna dig in there. Mistakes happen. I've been guilty. I've made so many mistakes in working on cars, and you learn from those mistakes as you go. And I promise, it only takes one time when working on these cars, when you have a mistake like that, that will teach you for the next time. Now, if you guys are looking for more formal schooling or training, but you don't want to go to like UTI or something along those lines, something that I have found that has been extremely helpful in some of the more complex stuff, or even if you're a beginner and you're wanting to learn how engines work, how to like disassemble, install parts, get that confidence, is HPA. We have worked with HPA Academy quite a few times. They're a fantastic company if you are looking to do any type of online schooling. Anything from like motor builds, engine tuning, EFI tuning, all of this, you name it. They probably got a fabrication and welding, basic understanding of how cars work, things of that nature. I'd highly suggest them if you are wanting to do some more formal, like, I guess, schooling type. It's not really a school. It's just like an online, you know what I mean. It'll help you learn more. And if you guys are interested in that, I'll leave a discount code in the description for you guys if that is something you're interested in. Now, all the modifications that we mentioned in this video are just my take on beginner or entry-level modification stuff, with a couple moderate ones that we sprinkled in there. But the list is endless for what you could consider entry-level, and everyone's gonna have their own take on what they view as entry-level. So if there's anything that you guys think that I severely missed that would be good for an entry-level car enthusiast who's learning to work on their own car, please feel free to drop it down below in the description. And I'm not talking about things like oil changes and what like that, like actual installs of parts to help boost confidence. Hell, even doing maintenance to be able to replace broken components on your car are going to help you gain that confidence to be able to work on it. That is all I've got for you guys on this one. Like I said, these are just my opinions on some good beginner and entry-level modifications. If there's anything I severely forgot, please feel free to drop it down below in the comments for everyone else. Hopefully this video did help you guys. Like I said, that's all I got for you guys on this one. So if you like the video, you know what to do. Go ahead, hit that thumbs up, hit that like button, turn it blue like the Subaru. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to be one of these corners, no idea which one I'll put it in quite yet, but with that, I will catch you guys in the next one. So peace out, homies.